Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
If we become aware, or when we are aware, we will definitely forward that information to our professional standards branch. And we have been made aware just recently that there may have been members who may have contributed, and at this point in time, we're still assessing our next steps.
It shouldn't be happening to a country that has done nothing to provoke the Russians other than the fact that it wants to remain free of Russian influence.
She says, well, I need to have some discussion with you, and we're going to extend the elimination of the second shift right now to the end of Q2. So, and we'll have further conversations, obviously, as things unfold.
Thanks for joining us. We're going to get to the unfolding conflict in Ukraine in just a few minutes. But first, we want to bring you a development today in the aftermath of the Windsor Bridge blockade. The city of Windsor has lifted the state of emergency that was put in place 10 days ago following the protest because the mayor says the immediate threat has been cleared. Meanwhile, the Windsor Police Service is trying to confirm if any of its members donated to the Freedom Convoy. The CBC's Chris Ensing joins us now live for more on this. Chris, you asked Windsor's Police Chief Pam Mizuno about this today. What did she say?
Yeah, when she spoke to reporters afterwards, we wanted to see if there were any members who had donated to the Freedom Convoy after hearing other police services were launching investigations. She did say that there were 3 members who matched names that they had been given that may have been on one of those donor lists, but still hard to figure out if there's an actual investigation going on. Here's the full exchange we had.
So if we become aware, or when we are aware, we will definitely forward that information to our professional standards branch. And we have been made aware just recently that there may have been members who may have contributed. And at this point in time, we're still assessing our next steps.
Are you able to give a sense of how many members or what that contribution might have been?
I don't know about the contribution, but there are 3 names that match names of Windsor Police Service members.
Are you able to give any details on what their role within the service might be?
No, I cannot.
What's your message that you want to send to the community in response to that, to see that, because there were, when we were out at the protest, we heard from people who were protesting that believed the police were on their side. What message do you want to send in response to those remarks?
So the Windsor Police Service, we hold our members to account both on and off duty, and we will deal with those matters accordingly.
No, I have reached out to the service for clarity there to see if information has been sent to the professional standards branch. Haven't heard back at this moment. Now, that donor list is something that was hacked and released and sent to journalists, and it contains the names, addresses, postal codes, we should say, and the amount that was donated for a number of individuals. CBC News hasn't been able to verify the names that are on those lists, but we can tell you that the government has frozen those donations, the Ontario government, that were made through that Give, Send, Go fundraising site. There are about $9 million that was raised from 100,000 donations. And the Ontario Provincial Police have launched an active investigation into an undisclosed number of members who have names on that list. The Toronto Police Service is also looking at 2 members who may be on that list as well.
And Chris, that exchange with the police chief, that was during an update on the Ambassador Bridge. So what else did the chief say about that event?
Yeah, it came after a board meeting that was scheduled this afternoon where board members were able to ask about the Ambassador Bridge update. Councillor and board member Reno Bordelin had some questions. None of the other members asked any questions, but did send kudos to the officers. The big updates that stood out for me was Mizuno saying that they do not see an active threat at the Ambassador Bridge, saying that that convoy that was turned around last week on its way here from Ottawa, about 250 kilometers out, was the only threat of its scale that they've seen, that things have been relatively calm. You can see behind me here, barriers still in place. This is at College and Huron Church. This one likely to stay for some time still. There's not an ETA on when it will be lifted, but some of the other ones will be lifted on Huron Church either today or into tomorrow, she said. I asked her specifically about the Emergencies Act, about whether or not that was something that was used in any policing efforts. The protest was cleared before that was invoked, but the Prime Minister said this blockade was what led him to invoke it. She said that that was not used in any policing efforts. And when I asked her if it sounds like it had no impact, she said no, it did not have an impact on their operations. And then as far as how she said that she was proud of the way that her police service had acted, we also asked about the amount of money that has been spent on this. She wasn't able to give us any information on that, despite hearing from Ottawa Police Service what they think the latest cost is in that figure. They are saying millions expected here, and we did hear from the mayor of Windsor, who continues to call for supports, saying that these barriers alone, about $1 million that the city had to spend in order to set them up and take them down. He's asking for help from the federal provincial government, hasn't put in a formal ask, and when I spoke with the Minister of Transportation, a cabinet minister with the federal government yesterday, he said they're waiting for them to tally up their costs before they make a move. Kat.
Thanks for this, Chris. CBC's Chris Ensing live from Huron Church tonight. And turning now to international news, Russia has launched a full-scale assault on Ukraine. Troops have invaded the country on 3 sides, sending thousands of people scrambling for shelter. Sasha Petrusik has more on the conflict that is being described as the darkest hours in Europe since the Second World War.
Ukrainians were woken by Russian missile strikes on the horizon, stunned by the sight of tanks rolling in shock at an invasion that Moscow had promised the world it was not planning.
It's very, very nervous, and I'm very scared, but I must be strong.
Near the Russian border, there were direct hits on apartment buildings around the city of Kharkiv. My house is completely destroyed, says teacher Olena Kurilo. I'm just lucky to be alive. I never thought this could happen in my lifetime. Putting his country under martial law, President Vladimir Zelensky warns of a new Iron Curtain being dropped across Eastern Europe by Russia. Our national task, he says, is to make sure that curtain doesn't fall across Ukraine. We have to fight back. Zelensky says the heaviest onslaught is in the south, in Crimea, but military infrastructure has taken hits across Ukraine. Indeed, Russia's attack seems to be thorough and well planned, its missiles targeting airports and other facilities in cities across the country. Troops streaming in from Russia and Belarus, where they've been amassing for weeks. Russia's big target today was in Chernobyl to the north, with fighting around nuclear facilities that are still leaking radiation. Meeting with business leaders in Moscow today, Russian President Vladimir Putin blamed an unspecified security threat from Ukraine for the invasion. It's a desperate measure, he says. They left us no other option. Ukraine created such security risks that we couldn't react differently. Now the options for Ukrainians are limited too. Many scramble for shelter in subway stations. This father worried for his 2-year-old.
The war started. Strach za ребенка.
Thousands of others stream across western borders into Poland, Romania, and Hungary, fleeing a Russian invasion that shows no sign of slowing. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
Russia's attack on Ukraine is sending shockwaves through the local community here in Windsor, Essex. Many are watching the violence unfold as they worry for family back home. The CBC's Jason Vio has more.
Feelings of fear, anger, sadness, and helplessness run through the minds of Ukrainians here in Windsor as they see video of Russian forces invading and the destruction that follows.
It hurts to see that happening to Ukraine. It's sad to see that happen, but it's sadder even to think that Ukrainians presently are dying in a war that they did not provoke.
Lisha is a first-generation Ukrainian with some family still in that country, family she worries about as the situation evolves so rapidly.
Very much worried because I think at first they said that if Russia invaded, that it would be mostly in the east. Well, that's proving untrue. It's shelled Ivano-Frankivsk, which is fairly close to my mom's town of city of Ternopil.
There are roughly 200 Ukrainian families in our region, and this afternoon some held a meeting to figure out how to help. On the table, fundraising and local rallies to show support.
This is something that the world can't turn their backs on. They cannot ignore. This impacts so many people on so many levels, particularly the Ukrainians.
Second-generation Ukrainian Carol Guimont wants to see Western countries do more than just economic sanctions against Russia.
I get angry, and I get angry at the Western world because they can sanction all they want, but they need to step up on another level. I know no one wants to say militarily, but I think that is going to be the only way they're going to stop Putin.
So far, the United Nations Refugee Agency estimates 100,000 people have fled homes in Ukraine.
It's just a feeling of futility that we want to do so much and we can't. And my daughter is, she's third-generation Ukrainian. She came home from work last night and took one look at the screen and started crying. And she said, you know, Mom, all those people, all those children dying on both sides of that border and for nothing.
Here in Windsor, a rally is scheduled for Sunday afternoon to show some support. That's set to happen outside of the Ukrainian National Federation building on Ottawa Street. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and several members of his cabinet have condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland called out Russian President Vladimir Putin directly, saying he has, quote, cemented his place among the most reviled European dictators of the 20th century. And she also addressed Canada's Ukrainian community.
To my own Ukrainian Canadian community, let me say this. Now is the time for us to be strong as we support our friends and family in Ukraine. Now is the time for us to remember Ще не вмерла Україна.
The Prime Minister has also announced a series of measures. Sanctions are being put in place against dozens of individuals and entities, including members of the Russian elite and major banks. Canada is also canceling all permits for exports to Russia. As well, more than 3,000 Canadian troops have been put on standby to deploy for NATO operations if needed. And meanwhile, the provincial government is giving $300,000 for humanitarian relief in Ukraine. And the provincial minister responsible for immigration says Ontario is looking into helping to bring in Ukrainians who are fleeing the bombing. Lorenda Redekop has more on that part of the story.
It's one of those rare moments in the legislature when all four provincial parties stood together.
Last night, we witnessed a violent attack on a sovereign nation by a despot, a thug.
We all call for diplomacy and immediate de-escalation of military actions.
We stand united for democracy. Democracy must always trump authoritarianism, Speaker.
The government says it's giving $300,000 to the Canada-Ukraine Foundation. It'll be used for humanitarian aid, medical help, as well as emergency shelter and food. Ontario's minister responsible for immigration says he spoke with his federal counterpart.
To offer our support, including our support of a dedicated immigration stream for families.
And the need will be great. Some experts say these attacks could displace up to 5 million people. While immigration is a federal matter, provinces do play a role.
Ultimately, these individuals settle within provinces and communities, so when provinces are willing and able, it definitely spurs the momentum and the initiative.
This immigration lawyer was preparing for an emergency staff meeting on how best to support families searching for help.
It's heartbreaking. You know, we've been flooded with calls already, and people are obviously desperately concerned.
While people are looking for help immediately, he expects it'll take weeks or months to bring Ukrainians here. Some could be fast-tracked, especially if they've started their immigration process.
Those are ones that have already been vetted. It's easier to move them, so there's certainly a backlog there. And then you have to move more quickly to the most affected areas and understand, are you able to accept 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 beyond normal immigration streams?
He says governments will now have to quickly figure out those numbers. According to Minister McNaughton's office, they've already been in touch with the private sector and have secured hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs for any Ukrainians who arrive here. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has rattled financial markets around the world. An investor reaction has been swift. Russian stocks crashed as much as 45%, with traders from Europe to North America selling off their shares. CBC's Nisha Patel has the latest on that.
Investor reaction to the conflict was swift. Russian stocks crashed as much as 45%. And from Europe to North America, traders took the market on a roller coaster ride.
As of this stage, it's mostly on a very kind of worried market, risk and uncertainty being built in.
Meanwhile, oil prices are surging, with Brent crude breaking through $105 a barrel for the first time since 2014. Russia pumps about 10% of the world's oil. Any disruption to global energy supplies is a big concern.
If you were to say lose that and you knew you were going to lose it for a long period of time, yeah, you could easily see prices, ratchet higher, 130, 150 or more.
Higher energy prices will make everything more expensive. Russia and Ukraine are also major suppliers of wheat, which could impact global food prices. It all could fan the flames of inflation, which is already at its hottest level in years. For now, though, Canada's economy is on solid footing.
In North America, we're reopening economies, so there is a tailwind to economic growth at the moment. So at least for the next few months, we should continue to see the economy progress in its recovery from the pandemic.
But the tensions will have ripple effects. Analysts say expect to see higher prices at the pumps and bigger bills at the grocery store.
That's why a conflict that can seem so far away at times for many Canadians might hit home in terms of the prices they're paying for everyday goods.
Still, it's early days and there will likely be more financial fallout to come. Much will depend on how long the conflict lasts and how far the economic impact spreads. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning now to the latest on COVID-19 in this region. The health unit says 2 more people have died in Windsor, Essex, including a man in his 20s. The other was a man in his 90s. The health unit provides few details around these deaths, like vaccination status, for example. Meanwhile, hospitalizations for the virus have remained fairly steady. Currently, 39 people are in hospital due to COVID, and that includes 9 people who are currently in intensive care. A reprieve for workers at the Windsor assembly plant. Stellantis has extended the factory's second shift into the spring after the company previously announced it would be cut. Now the shift will be extended to the end of June of this year. Union leader Dave Cassidy says while workers are pleased, there's still a lot of unease.
We just got to stay positive on it for everybody and just keep praying that we're going to move forward, and look at the glass half full instead of half empty kind of approach.
Let's take a live look outside there. It's brighter. The days are getting longer. That's nice to see. Now that weather advisory that we told you about last night, it is still in effect. A swath of snow is on the way tonight and into tomorrow morning. Colette will be here with more details, and she'll be here right after the break. Colette Kennedy is here now for a look at our weather forecast. Colette, we've got bad news for those of us who are tired of the snow and some good news for those who love a winter wonderland. So what's going on?
That's exactly it, Katarina. We do have some snow for those of you who love it, and those of you who don't, we just can't control it. So here it comes. It's really knocking on the door. I'll show you that on the radar in just a moment. But it is a snow event. This one does have mixed precipitation associated with it, this storm. However, that part stays south of the lower Great Lakes. We're into the cold sector, and I'm just illustrating that with a look at not only our temperatures, but the winds giving us a wind chill where it feels like -12. Winds will be a factor here because it's not just falling snow. We're looking at blowing snow as well. So that's going to reduce the visibility. The gusts so far, all the areas where you're not seeing one, it's because they haven't yet picked up over 30 kilometers an hour, but we're certainly starting to see this in areas where it's just beginning to nose closer. So those winds will go up. It is a winter weather travel advisory that we have in place. You have to get to extreme eastern Ontario there to get into the snowfall warning, where those amounts will be closer to 15 centimeters. I'll show you our amounts here in just a moment, but there it is on the radar. You can see just the leading edge of that snowfall. That will continue to track in, so conditions not good this evening, not good overnight for any of our shift workers or folks that need to be on the roads through those overnight hours. Tomorrow early mornings might still be a little troubling, but then it's going to make haste through. There's going to be some enhancement with this system, lake enhancement, as it gets further east, but it will move quickly enough through southwestern Ontario that I think we won't see that effect, and also it won't have as much time to lay down as much snow. And hey, later in the day tomorrow, we might even see some sunny breaks on the backside of this. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, in terms of those snowfall amounts, we're in that 5 to 10 centimeter range. It doesn't mean that locally there are not going to be some pockets here. Again, with the potential for a tiny bit of lake enhancement of seeing that a little bit closer to 10. But these are feeling pretty good to me given the pace that it's going to move through at. Overnight temperatures very similar really to where we're sitting right now, just a little bit of a dip, and those winds picking up as they ramp up tomorrow. We don't warm up much. These are just flurries that will be left behind in the wake of the system, but otherwise it will be moving out in the morning hours, Katarina.
Oh, I'm not looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Colette. Appreciate it. When we come back, some businesses, they are trying to help Canadians keep their grocery bills down as those food prices, they keep going up. Stay with us. Rising food prices have Canadians looking for new ways to keep their grocery bills down. And a number of businesses have stepped in to fill that need while working to eliminate food waste. CBC's Alison Northcott has the details.
So I'm going to open the Flash Food app here.
This is one way Luke Nichols saves money on groceries.
I found some cinnamon bagels here.
Using a food waste app that connects him to discount products at grocery stores and allows him to pay less for food that might otherwise be thrown out.
As food prices rise and people start feeling the constraints like I am, that they look to the alternatives.
About 20% of food produced in Canada each year ends up going to waste, and there are several companies now trying to tap into that.
The growth we've seen in Canada has been really the fastest we've seen across any of the other countries we've launched.
For another app called Too Good To Go, the company says part of that growth is about timing because it entered the Canadian market just as food prices were rising.
As we're all faced and pinched with the challenges of food inflation, our platform is a great avenue to be able to get great value.
I can increase the number of coupons.
Restaurants like this Montreal bubble tea shop use the app to sell what's left over at the end of the day at cheaper prices.
We are practically becoming zero food waste facility.
And that's just one way consumers are cutting costs. Others are shopping at stores like this one in Calgary, specializing in selling produce near the end of its shelf life and drawing in customers with low prices.
Being a low-income senior, I'm trying to stretch the dollar as much as I can and eat as healthy as I can.
When things aren't perfect, they have some blemishes or they have a few days left on them, we list them for a cheaper price. They're still perfectly good to eat.
Food rescue apps and discount produce stores are good tools, but bigger changes are needed, says this food systems expert.
There's just a lot of opportunities around shortening the food supply chain, growing in the city, growing in peri-urban areas that we really should take advantage of.
She says that would be one step towards a less wasteful and more equitable food system. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
That is it for CBC Windsor News. We are, of course, continuing to follow the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. For the latest, go to cbc.ca/news. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.